Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about something that I think we can all relate to: mistakes. This video is going to be about the top 5 mistakes I've made as a plant parent. I've been growing plants for a while now. I suppose relatively speaking, 4 years is not that long. I think it's 4.5, almost 5 years now. But it feels like a lifetime. I can't remember a time when I didn't have a ton of plants. And of course, like anyone else in that space of time, I've made quite a few mistakes. I dove into this hobby head first, actually. I wanted plants, so I got some, and I just didn't really give too much thought to what was involved in caring for them. And so it's been a lot of trial and error. And I hope by sharing some of the mistakes I've made along the way, this can help you if you want to grow plants of your own. Mistake number 1, watering. I think when you think of plants, watering tends to be the thing that people concern themselves with the most. Before I had plants, I honestly thought that you got a plant and you watered it every day. I have no idea where I got that notion, but in my head, that's just the vision of plants, right? That you just give them lots of water constantly, and then they're fine. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Watering is important, but not in the way that I thought, right? So what I've realized, first of all, is that there just isn't a one-size-fits-all when it comes to water for your plants. And when I first got these, people would say, oh, you just feel it out and you figure out how to water it. And I couldn't stand that characterization. I'm a naturally logical person, and I really don't like waffly ideas on how to do something. I personally prefer to research a problem, figure out a solution. I prefer for it to be tangible and logical, and then go for it. So I just could not get on board with this idea of just kind of figuring out how to water a plant. Everything I read said you just stick your finger in the soil, and when it feels dry, you water it. I just think if you've never had a plant before, how do you know what that feels like? Like, I don't know if you've ever stuck your finger in a pot of soil, but without knowing what feels like wet and what feels like dry, it's impossible really to know what you're looking for. So yeah, my biggest mistake was listening to these people who said stick your finger in and then water it, because honestly, that just led to endless amounts of angst. Luckily, because I did research, I did not fall into the trap of watering every day. Like, I found out pretty quickly that that wasn't the way to go. But there was nothing to suggest what I should do instead. And what I've come to realize, of course, is that obviously every plant just has different watering needs, and that you just feel it out as you go. But, you know, as you get a feel for it, it does become easier. In the beginning, I will say, the thing that helped me out the most, and I know some people poo-poo this, was to use a moisture meter. Using a moisture meter gave me a sense of what moist versus dry actually physically feels like. And once I was able to sort of get my head around that concept, it just became a lot easier for me to sort of get an idea of when my plants might need water. Now, of course, now that I have over 100 plants, I'm not sticking a moisture meter in everything. And moisture meters, some people hate them. I've never had a problem with them. They work really well for me, and personally, I will absolutely recommend them to beginners. I don't care what other people say. I'm just talking about my experiences. To me, moisture meters are really good for you to just get a sense of what's up and what's down. But what I do now is I lift the pot, which sounds crazy, of course, but once you've had the plants for a while, you get a sense of what it feels like when it's freshly watered. When it has enough water, it feels a bit heavier, and when it needs water, it's light. So there's that. I use clear pots when I don't see condensation on the side. I know water is needed. I look at the leaves when they look less perky. I know that water is needed. I try not to let it get that far, because honestly, if a plant is wilting, it's probably gone too far down the needs water streets. But most of all, I think The thing that has helped me the most is understanding that every plant is different. They all have different watering needs. And, it's okay to have a little bit of trial and error. These plants are tougher than we think. So, with a little bit of kind of figuring things out, the watering is not as complicated as it seems. Yeah, that was my biggest mistake. Thinking I could just water them all exactly the same. You can't. They're all different. Mistake number 2, buying a plant because everything I read told me that it was a beginner plant. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't something to the notion of beginner plants. Like, it's good to understand what plants maybe are a bit easier than others, but I think when people are sort of recommending beginner plants, there should be some questions asked. Like, I feel like there should be a questionnaire that you answer before you decide what constitutes the right beginner plant for you. Because the right beginner plant for me is not going to be the same as the right beginner plant for you. Let me give you an example. I live in a high-rise apartment with south-facing windows and a lot of light. My cousin lives in a basement apartment with very small windows. Both of us do not need the same beginner plants. There are some plants that I can grow in here without batting an eyelid. They will be so easy for me. But my cousin would struggle mightily with them. And there are some that would thrive in my cousin's conditions, and they would struggle here because of the overabundance of light. So I think really this concept of beginner plants or not beginner plants is ridiculous. What it comes down to is, what are your conditions? If I could go back, I think the first question I would ask myself before I even purchase the plant is, what are my conditions? Like, what direction do my windows face? I would get my phone out, open the compass, point it at the windows, look at the direction that the windows face and say, oh, I have south windows. That's a lot of light. Succulents would do really well in that window, okay? Cacti would do really well in that window. Hoya would do really well in that window. Monstera would love that window. On the other hand, something like a Philodendron gloriosum would have a very hard time in that window. So you can't know that unless you know what those types of conditions are. And I think, yes, humidity matters. Yes, temperature matters, but in the end, light is king. And so I think going back, deciding on my first plant, I would have taken note of my conditions and then made my choices. As luck would have it, I eventually figured it out, and I was able to move them around the apartment just to match what the conditions were. But I could have saved myself a lot of angst if I just started from understanding the conditions to begin with. So yeah, the other thing about going with your traditional beginner plants is I ended up buying things like a snake plant, pothos. No, please, I'm not saying these are bad plants. I have a snake plant, I have a pothos, but to me, these are some of the most boring plants out there. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I like snake plants, but they're sort of like part of the furniture to me, right? I just don't find them to be particularly exciting to grow. Like, I enjoy having them, and I like the structure that they bring to the space, but I'm not sure they make for a good first plant, because when you first get a plant, the thrill is in the new leaves, in, how the structure of the plant changes as it grows. Snake plants require a lot of patience for you to enjoy that. Yes, they grow, but it's it's a slightly slower process. It's not as obvious. Like, I have mine in exceptional light and it grows really well, but it's still not the same as watching a monstera put up new leaves and get big holes and fenestrations. You know what I mean? So I think there's something to be said for considering what you want out of that plant. Do you just want something that sits in the corner like a piece of furniture? Or are you into the care and the nurture of something? If you're someone who loves to nurture something and you want to be able to water frequently, a snake plant obviously is not going to be the right choice for you because you're going to love it to death, right? So in that case, you're probably going to want something that likes a bit more water. An Anthurium radicans ex luxurians or a Monstera would be better choices for you because you'll have more opportunities to water them and more things to do to the plant, as it were, to help you feel like a plant parent. Are you someone who just doesn't want any kind of maintenance, just want to leave it alone, set it and forget it? then yeah, get a snake plant or a ZZ plant or I don't know, an aglaonema, you know? So there are so many choices out there that are not difficult to care for. It just depends on your lifestyle. It depends on why you're getting a plant in the first place. So all that to say, I no longer believe in the concept of beginner plants. I just think there are plants you have the conditions and lifestyle for, and there are other plants that are just not a fit. And if I could go back, I would have a better understanding of that. So that's a mistake I made, and if you're watching this video, you hopefully will not make the same mistake. Mistake number 3, not paying enough attention to where you purchase your plants. Now, when I first got into plants, or the first time I decided to buy some, I just thought, I guess I had no idea where people bought these things, and so I just went to a big box store and I didn't go, this was during the pandemic actually, I just put in an order for some plants from a big box store and they were delivered to my house and off I went. Now, why is this a mistake? I think that when you first get plants, you should strive to get them from a place that you know has cared for them as carefully and properly as possible. And I'm not saying that big box stores do not do well with plants, but some do and some don't. It just depends on whether they have an actual nursery attached to the store or whether the plants are just on the shelf somewhere, whether the staff knows how to care for the plants or not. The problem with getting plants from this type of situation is if the plant starts to struggle, when you're a beginner, you have a hard time judging whether you did something wrong or the issue was already existing before the plant arrived. If you get your plant from a nursery, a well-established, reliable seller, someone who is focused on plant care and understands watering, light, pest management, all that kind of thing, then you know that most likely the fault is with your care. On the other hand, if it comes from God knows where, then you're having to troubleshoot and you're not equipped with the tools yet because, again, you're a beginner. You don't know the difference between what a healthy or an unhealthy such and such a plant looks like. So I think in order to avoid that, the easiest thing is to do is to not get plants from big box stores in the beginning. The 3 plants that I got from big box store to begin with, one was in great condition. It is my Monstera Deliciosa. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but I'll show it here. It was tiny when I got it, but it was in excellent condition, and it was potted in soil that was too dense and mucky and wet, but I didn't know that at the time. However, it's a Monstera, and they're very hardy to that type of thing, and I have really good light in here, so that didn't matter. The plant did really well regardless, and by the time I realized what type of soil I should be using, it was irrelevant because it was time to repot anyway. No problem. I also got a yucca and a snake plant. Now again, snake plants, so hardy, they were fine. The yucca struggled, not because, and I read and read and read everything, I was giving it good care, but now that I now understand that it came with a fungal infection. It just was not in a good condition when it arrived here. But I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know anything about plants, right? Had I bought it from a reliable is the wrong word. Had I bought it from an actual nursery, it likely would have been in better condition. And I would have, you're just reducing the possibility of running into some of these problems and difficulties. So if I could go back, well, I probably wouldn't necessarily choose a yucca, but that's irrelevant. If I could go back, I would have made my first few purchases from nurseries instead of a big box store. And then, once you've established your plant growing credentials and you're comfortable, you know what to look for, you understand different types of potting media, different pest potential situations, then, big box it away. But in the beginning, I would advise against that. Mistake number 4, buying plants because everybody else likes them and you therefore think you should have them. There are so many plants that I have had in the past, or maybe that I have now, that I bought just because everybody else said they were awesome, amazing. I don't know what it is. You just get caught up in this hysteria of thinking that you want this plant. But when you're really, really honest with yourself, is it you? Not really. And it's odd because on the one hand, I'm able to be quite honest with myself about things that everyone loves. that I personally just don't care for. Like fiddle leaf figs, I just they're not for me. I don't see the appeal. So, and I never have, so I never succumbed to buying one. For the longest time, I didn't have a single pothos in here because I thought they were really ugly. I did not like them. And I still only have two, maybe three. I have a couple of pothos. I still don't like them. I got them because I needed something to put on a top shelf that basically gets zero light, and I knew that they would be fine there, so I got them. And they do the job in that regard, but honestly, I still don't care for them, so that hasn't changed. But yeah, I can think of quite a few plants that I bought, and looking back, I didn't like them then. I thought they would grow on me, they didn't. That's not the way to have plants, right? Why would you need a plant to grow on you? You should probably only buy it if you really, really want it. So I won't be making that mistake again. That I think is something that I had to learn the hard way. You don't have to constantly be buying plants. It's okay to just not buy plants for months on end. The joy of the plants is in growing them, right? Like I got them to grow them. The idea is not to just keep collecting and collecting and collecting, right? So that I think is probably one of my biggest mistakes, just constantly needing to buy plants. I'm sure there's something deeper behind that. I think a lot of us in the plant community probably have something that we need to look at there in terms of our constant desire to just collect and collect and collect. When I go and browse and I don't see anything that I like, why do I then pick up something that everyone thinks is lovely, even when I don't care for it? I don't know. But that's something that I'm working quite hard on. That's a mistake I used to make a lot in the beginning, and I think I've come out of it for the most part. I think I'm a lot better about that now. Like, I think typically if I buy a plant, I really, really want it, and I hope it stays that way because that's the quickest way to overwhelm, honestly. If I had 300 plants that I was obsessed with, then I don't think keeping up with the care of them would be as difficult as if I had 120 plants and I loved 100 and just tolerated 20. You know what I mean? Like, why would I even want to be in that situation, right? So yeah, that's a mistake I hope to never make again. And we come to the end. This mistake is one that I have made repeatedly over 4 years. I don't know why I continue to make it, but I think slacking on pest prevention is a recipe for disaster when you have a large plant collection. As soon as I had more than 20 plants, that is something that I learned, that these pest infestations can get out of control so quickly. And then these plants that we love, that bring us so much joy, just become a chore to care for because you're just constantly treating, wiping, trying to prevent, the new leaves come in looking awful, the whole thing, the stress of it all, right? And even though I know this, somehow I end up in the situation over and over again now. I can't tell you how many messages I've received telling me to just get beneficial bugs and be done with it. I know. I know that beneficial bugs probably could release me from some of the angst of potential pest infestations. Like, I know that. But there is a mental block that I struggle with. I just can't get behind the idea of knowingly releasing thousands of bugs into my apartment. I don't know why. I just don't feel able to do it. So for now, until I hypnotize myself or do something to get past this, beneficial bugs are not what I want to do. I don't know why. I don't know why I don't want to do it. I don't know. I just don't want to do it. But what does work really well for me is preventative treatment. When I'm on top of things, every couple of weeks or so, I will spray them all with a mixture of neem peroxide, peppermint castile soap, and water. And it works like a charm. The leaves are shiny, they are clean, they are beautiful, they are free of dust. There are no pests anywhere to be seen. This is something that works when done consistently. When you already have an active infestation, it's difficult, depending on what it is and how bad it is, it can be difficult to treat it this way. But if you actually are ahead of the curve and you're just treating preventatively, this is one of the most effective things you can do. And yet I just keep making this mistake of like getting off the schedule, getting off the routine, completely slacking and not doing it. And then, 6 months later, there's some huge pest infestation, and I act surprised, shock, horror. What happened? I don't know. We all know what happened. I stopped treating preventatively. I stopped being proactive. Pests happen. They happen. It's just part of having plants. And yeah, it gets out of control. If you stay on top of the prevention and all this, then even if the pest infestation starts to happen, it goes away quite quickly. So that's another mistake that I made. I wish I could say don't make that mistake, but who am I to tell you what to do? And I'm still making that mistake myself. Those are my mistakes that I made as a beginner plant parent. I hope this video was informative and helpful. I would really love to know what mistakes you made. Just drop them in the comments below. Let's chat about it, Everyone, I think, has completely different experiences depending on their environment, depending on what type of plants they have. So yeah, I'd love to know what kind of beginner plant mistakes you feel you made and what you would do differently if you were starting again, what advice you would give to newcomers to our hobby. Anyway, that's it from me today. Until next time, I'll see you.